got a 2011 Toyota Tundra, and the owner says that they have no power steering and their brakes are not working very well. Let's get in here and see if we can figure out what's going on. All right, so of course we confirmed that the power steering is not working. Now, I already looked at this last night and saw that our power steering rack has completely blown out the seal on the passenger side. All of the fluids leaked out even onto their brakes. So it looks like we're gonna have to do a brake job on this as well. But if you run into a situation like this where you don't have power steering, first thing you wanna do is pop the hood and take a look at your power steering reservoir and make sure that you have fluid. Now, at first glance, I thought that we had some fluid still in the reservoir, which was kind of puzzling because this is very difficult to turn. But upon closer inspection, as soon as I took off the lid, I could see that that power steering dipstick was completely dry. And let me take you down in here. This is completely empty. See, if I put my light right up against this reservoir now, you can see that it is completely empty. But this little line down here kind of threw me at first, and I thought, oh, well, maybe we do have some fluid in there, but I think that's just stained or a little bit of residue from the previous fluid. Now, if your reservoir is empty, you're gonna wanna crawl underneath and take a look at the power steering pump and the rack and all of the lines. And in our case, it was pretty obvious right here because this bellows is completely saturated with fluid, and it looks like it's also gotten all over the inside of the wheel and even saturated our brakes, which is why they're having a stopping issue or some brake issues. So that's something we're gonna have to address as well. But it looks like the inner seal on this rack has completely blown out. So we're gonna have to get a new one or rebuilt one and replace it. I just put the seat belt through the steering wheel and latched it and then just slid the seat back a little bit to make that nice and snug. And now that's not gonna turn on us. All right, first I'm gonna take off the skid plate here so we have better access. Now the front part of the skid plate will stay hooked on here while you loosen the other bolts in the back. Carefully lift that off of the hooks in the front. See, you've got these little hooks on the front, so you can just lift that up and take it off and move this out of the way. We just need to lift this high enough to get the wheels off the ground. All right, that looks good. Tires off the ground, and we're still on the jack, but we've got those jack stands underneath as well. All right, now we can take off the wheels. All right, now we need to loosen or break free this jam nut. Knocked over the camera, but I got it loose. Just back that off a couple threads is good. Now this is obviously metric, but the biggest size that I had in metric wouldn't fit. So 1.25 inch, still a little loose on the jam nut, and then 1/16 worked pretty well to hold that tie rod end steady. Let's go do the same on the other side. Not too bad. Again, this one's been saturated in power steering fluid, so that came off pretty easily. But, you know, if you don't have wrenches large enough to break this loose, a big adjustable crescent wrench like this, a really nice heavy-duty one, will work as well. All right, now we need to take out this cotter pin. All right, now I'm going to use a 24mm socket and take off this castle nut right here. Now, don't make the mistake of pounding down on this. What you'll do is end up just mushrooming this and ruining the threads. Now, other people will put this castle nut back on partway and pound on that. That's still not the right way to do this. You need to either use a tie rod end separator tool, or you can even use a pickle fork, but that's going to damage the boot. I like the Tanya Harding method. All you need to do is just strike it right here. You're just hitting this part of the knuckle, and that will shock this and break the taper and drop this down. There we go. All right, now here, what we're gonna wanna do is count the number of revolutions before this comes off so we can use the same number when we put the new rack in. So let's go ahead and count this. 1, 13 revolutions. Now we're gonna reuse these. They look like they're in pretty good shape. So I'm just gonna set this down out of the way and write down the number 13 on this side. Now let's go do the other side. You know, it's not a bad idea to throw that nut back on if you're a little wild with the hammer, just in case you accidentally do hit it up here. It'd probably be better to hit the nut than the threads. There we go. and just let that rotor turn back the other way. Now I did this on the other side too, but I'm just gonna spin that castle nut on so I don't lose it. There's one. And I'm going to write this one down as well so we don't forget. All right, now to disconnect the steering shaft here off of the splines, we just need to use a 12 millimeter. I'm just using this ratcheting wrench from Mountain. Now let's see if this will just slide right off. There we go. Perfect. I'm just going to put this bolt back in part way to make sure I don't lose it. Now the hard lines have these mounts on the rack, and we just need to take those off. I'm just using a 12 millimeter ratcheting wrench. All right, and then you can see we've got another bolt right here that mounts these lines to the rack. I'm just using this Mountain 12 millimeter flex head ratcheting wrench, and that looks like we got it. I'm just gonna put some pressure on the bolt below so we can back that off. And just use your fingertips to back it out the rest of the way. All right, we got it. Now we can go disconnect the lines from the rack. Now, if you can see through here, those are the two lines that we need to disconnect, and that's a 17 millimeter. I recommend you use a flare nut wrench. I also have this crow's foot flare nut that works pretty well, but I'm gonna see if we can get to these either from up above or from behind through this little opening. Looks like we can get on here, no problem. Let's just loosen these up. Now, if it's fighting you a little bit or kind of pushing back the other direction, just take your time. Back these out nice and slow. And give those two a spray just to help them back out a little bit easier. All right, I'm trying the crow's foot from above for this other line, and we got it. Okay, we got that one out. There we go. All right, both of the lines are free. All right, now we need to loosen and remove these bolts that hold the rack in place. They do go into nuts up here and they're not captive, so we're probably gonna have to hold this steady. Now this side is easy because we can get a wrench right on that one. This side's kind of difficult because it's got this line that loops around here, so we need to use a wrench with a little bit of an offset to hold that nut steady while we do this. So I'm gonna use this one right here. This is from Toyota, Japan. I think Mountain one would work as well, but you see I've got that up there now. Gonna hold that steady. So now we can just impact this one off using a 19 millimeter socket here. Be careful to not drop that, but there we go. Now this is saturated in power steering fluid, so slid right out. All right, for this other side, looks like an open end wrench is gonna work best. Just to hold that steady while we zip this off. There's the nut. And don't forget the washer here as well. I didn't realize we had a washer on that too, so I grabbed the washer from the other side. Now let's see if we can zip this all the way out. There we go. All right, now we should be free. What I'm gonna do is shift it over to the passenger side first, and then see if we can drop this part down and then back it out. All right, we got it out. That was easy. All right, so here's the old one next to the remanufactured one that we picked up here. I just got this at O'Reilly. It doesn't come with a new jam nut, so we'll have to take this off the old one and put it on. It's also interesting that they painted the threads here. Not sure why they would do that, but the nut seems like it's still going on okay. These are the little replacement O-rings that it comes with, so we need to put these on the power steering lines before we hook those up. And we also need to take out these plastic caps. I just noticed we don't have our protective rubber boot or dust cover, so I guess we got to take that off the old one. It's not too big of a deal. We'll put that on here. Just need to take off the jam nut on this side and transfer it over to the new or rebuilt power steering rack that we got. Now, as far as setting this up to match up with the existing rack, I'm just taking a couple quick measurements here. We're about 12 1/4 here on this one, and about 12 1/2 on this side. I know that's not super precise, but I'm gonna see what it looks like at the other side as well. Just gonna pull a measurement straight across, and we're right at 16. And on this one, we're about 15 3/4. So that's pretty consistent with our rack needing to be shifted just a little bit. So I'm gonna see if I can just turn this shaft. I'm gonna put this paper towel over this and use some vice grips. And we're just gonna turn that just ever so slightly. And now we're at 12 1/2 here, 12 1/2 here. So now we're at, I'd say 15 3/4 there. And the same. May not be perfect, but it's gonna get us really close or in the neighborhood so that when they take this in for an alignment, they won't have to change it up too much. All right, well, I think that's good enough as far as centering that rack. So let's go ahead and put this one in. All right, we're just gonna try to muscle this up. Just the same way we took out the old one. Slide through the passenger side first. And we just need to get it cleared past this part here. There we go. And pull it back through. Okay, that's right about where that sits. Just want to get these bolts started. See if I can line them up. There we go. I'm not going to tighten this, but I'm just going to loosely put this washer and nut on the top. Same with this one. I'm just going to try to get this up and at least make sure we got the rack in the right place. And then I'm going to put that washer and nut on the top. And just going to get that loosely on there for right now. I think we can still shift this rack around a little bit if we need to. My only concern is getting those lines started and making sure that they thread in there properly without cross threading. All right, now before we put these power steering lines back in, you can see you can pull it up right here. We do need to change out the little O-ring that's on the end. Just going to grab this little hook tool and pull it off. There we go. And we'll just put the new one on. All right, both O-rings are on. All right, now I'm gonna do my best to get these lines in here and get them started by hand. You just gotta be real careful. Make sure you do not cross thread these. I might have to go undo the mount. Now I'm having a little bit of trouble getting these lines to actually line up so that I can connect them. So what I'm gonna do is loosen this little mount right here that connects the two together. And this one over here. I'm not going to take them out completely, but that now gives me a little bit more flexibility. But I think loosening this is now going to give me a little bit more room, and I should be able to get that lined up. Oh, that's much better. I just didn't want to risk cross-threading this into that remanufactured rack and have a leak or a bigger problem. Always make sure you do this carefully and double check as you go. So we got one started. Let's see if we can get the other one. Not a lot of room in here, but should be able to get it. Okay, looks like we got them both started by hand. Let's go ahead and snug these up. All right, there's one. Now I'm sure there's a torque spec for this, but I'm just making it nice and snug. Just don't want to overdo those fittings. Okay, I'm happy with that. This little crow's foot definitely came in handy. All right, now we can put our steering shaft back on. Just gonna take this bolt back out. Carefully line that up and slide that on. Now let's go get something to separate that. Just had to separate that to open that up a little bit with a mini pry bar, and then just kind of wiggle that on. You can actually see through there the little shaft is lined up. So we've got that little cutout or that little shoulder, and then this bolt will just feed right through. And we just want to make that nice and snug. That looks good. Now we're going to get these bolts that go to the rack tightened up. And I'm going to torque this to 89 foot-pounds. All right, and then we have these two little bolts that mount the lines here to the rack. Definitely kind of hard to get your fingers up around there, but we got it started. And same with this other side. Now this one's pretty tough to get to. Once you get it started, just kind of use your fingertips to spin it in. I've got my arm up here, up behind the sway bar, just so I can get my fingers on it. Oh man, really, really tight in there. All right, now remember I also loosened these two little 10mm bolts on these line brackets, so I'm just gonna snug those back up. I think loosening these was the ticket. That gave me a little bit more wiggle room on the lines down at this end to be able to line those up. All right, now we can put our tie rod ends back on, and on this side, the driver's side, we had 12 rotations. So let's see if we can get this lined up. Yep, there's one. All right, and then I'm going to take the castle nut off, push the rotor back over, push that up through the knuckle, and let's go ahead and get this castle nut started. All right, we're going to get this nice and snug and torque this to 51 foot-pounds. So I'm going to turn it a little bit more. Now, if it doesn't line up the first time, it's okay to turn it a little bit more. You just definitely don't want to ever back it off. But there we go. All right, then we can put the tie rod in on this side, and we should have about 13 revolutions this time. 1. 13. All right, just like on the other side, just gonna take this castle nut off, and I'm gonna push the rotor over so that we can line up the knuckle and get this one in. Then we'll start our castle nut on here. Always use a new cotter pin. Cut off the excess there. Now I'm just gonna make this jam nut snug, because of course this is gonna go in for an alignment as soon as we're done here. All right, that looks good. Now I looked up this truck to see if they had anything special as far as the type of fluid, and it says just use transmission fluid, so I'm just gonna use this O'Reilly transmission fluid. A lot of people argue, no, you need to use power steering fluid, but this stuff works just fine. Now I'm gonna leave the funnel in here. It's actually kind of snug, and that's gonna help me overfill it just a little bit so that when I start it up and it sucks in all the new fluid, we're not gonna go dry right away. All right, now I'm gonna go start up the truck, and then we'll check for leaks underneath. All right, so I've got somebody in the vehicle turning the steering wheel all the way lock to lock. And you can hear all that air working its way out of the pump. It looks good. We don't have any leaks or anything, so that's awesome. Let's take a look at that reservoir one more time. Okay, well, we're still full. That's good. One finger turn, so that's a huge difference. Now I know we're up in the air, but still, it's definitely working now. All right, well, everything looks good. We don't have anything leaking or anything like that. And as you saw, it's really easy to turn the wheel. Everything's starting to sound a little bit quieter too once that pump got all of the air out of it. I'm gonna take this on a quick test drive just to make sure that we don't have any issues or anything like that. Then we'll come back, check for leaks, and put that skid plate back on. Well, that definitely is turning much easier, like it should. Well, it sounds pretty good, and it seems to be driving straight. No shimmies or shakes or anything like that. You know, the wheel's maybe not perfectly straight when I'm going straight. It's a little bit to the right, but the alignment shop can take care of that. You see, we're pretty darn close, maybe just a hair to the right. But we'll definitely get this in for an alignment, and they can adjust that or tune that up a little bit. We got it pretty close, though. Kind of lucky on this one. Now, I just put some new rotors and pads on here as well, and they seem to be working just fine. So, you know, the owners said that they are having some brake issues initially, and they didn't realize that it was the power steering fluid leaking all over their brakes. But once we got in there and saw that that's what had happened, you know, we knew we had to get that fixed or changed out, and unfortunately we had to do the brakes as well, even though these pads and rotors weren't really worn down. All right, well, I think everything's looking good, sounds good. Fluid looks good, so that's good. I think we've gotten pretty much most of the air out just on that test drive. Let's take a look down below and make sure we don't have any leaks. Well, it looks good. No drips, no leaks or anything like that, so I'm gonna call this one done. Let's put the skid plate back on, and we'll wrap this up. Remember, we've got these hooks on the front. We can just slide those up like so. Now make sure you get all of these started before you go around and tighten them. And you're done. Everything's working great. It's nice and smooth, no leaks at all, and it's actually driving pretty straight. Unfortunately, we did have to change out our front brake pads and rotors because that power steering fluid had leaked all over our brakes, completely saturating them and making that unsafe to drive. But that's pretty much it. I hope you guys like this video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. And of course, I'll get a link in the description to some of the other power steering racks that I found online, along with some of the other parts and tools used in the video as well. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck.